So today's video was yet again birthed out of curiosity. After benchmarking 6 different $100 video cards, I came to the realization that video cards nowadays are a lot faster and a lot more efficient than video cards in 2011. The GTX 560 non-Ti, for example, used 2 6-pin power connectors and had a 150 watt TDP. The GTX 1060 today uses 1 6-pin power connector and has a 120 watt TDP. That is a huge advancement, and it only took 6 years. Yeah, 6 years is quite a long time in the technology industry, but generally speaking, that's an exponential performance increase if we graph pure performance. Performance per watt is even more mind-blowing. NVIDIA has achieved almost 4 times better performance per watt with their X60 cards in the last 6 years. The same thing can be said for AMD. If we go from the Radeon HD 6850 all the way to the current RX 480, and I use the 480 instead of the 580 because TechPowerUp had a reference model review for comparison, you'll see a similar trend. Great leaps in mid-range power and performance per watt. 2010 and 2011 were also the years that AMD and NVIDIA really started to hone in on the sub $100 video card market. And that's mostly because they had the technology to do so. Node shrinks allowed for stronger video cards, cheaper production costs, and greater efficiency. The GT240, which was released for $89 in 2009, was an awful choice for games that didn't predate 2007, though to be fair, it wasn't exactly targeted for gaming. The 5750 and 5670's debut really started the push towards budget-oriented gamers. NVIDIA followed suit with the GT400 series, and the budget segment really just took off from there. Today we have the RX 550 and RX 560, 2 sub $100 video cards that show the prowess of cheaper video cards and how far they've evolved the last 6 years. They're going to directly battle the 6-year-old GTX 560 Ti, the $249 debuting higher mid-range card from NVIDIA, but I will also include other graphics card comparisons so we can have a comprehensive picture of the 2 graphics cards. Now, gaming in 2011 is a little bit different than what it is now. 6 years ago, 1680 by 1050 was a pretty popular resolution, and unfortunately 1920 by 1080 was not a commonly used resolution for benchmarking games by reviewers. So in order to rid as many discrepancies as possible, and there will be discrepancies, that's pretty much inevitable, I will be benchmarking all of the games at 1680 by 1050. So yeah, the test bench is an R5 1400 at 3.9 GHz, 16 GB of DDR4 memory clocked at 2933, and Windows 10 64-bit. I will be using the latest drivers available for all of the video cards. Unfortunately, the game list is rather tiny. I chose titles only from 2010, 2011, and 2012. I initially had games such as Crysis 2 and Battlefield Bad Company 2 on the list, but I was riddled with crashes, errors, and an array of other issues. Fortunately, 3 games ran perfectly fine: Metro 2033, Dirt 3, and Saints Row the Third. Without any further ado, let's get right into the benchmarks. So Dirt 3 was the easiest of all the games to run. At 1680 by 1050, each GPU averaged about 60 FPS or higher, but only the 560 could maintain 60 FPS at least 99% of the time. As you can see, the 560 completely demolished the 550 and 560 Ti. The 560 Ti shows a 10% performance increase on average and an 8% increase on the minimums. The differences between the video cards tighten up in the 2011 title Saints Row the Third. The RX 560 only shows a 16% performance increase over the 560 Ti, a much smaller delta compared to the 43% in Dirt 3. The RX 550 and GTX 560 Ti perform similarly on average, but the 560 Ti pulls through with 24% better minimum frame rates than the RX 550. Lastly, all of the video cards struggle in Metro 2033, easily the toughest game tested for this video. The RX 560 shows that it really is not in the same tier of performance as the 560 Ti and the RX 550 with a 39.5 FPS average, a 46% performance jump over the next fastest video card in the benchmark, the RX 550. The $80 video card shows a clear lead over the NVIDIA counterpart in both average and minimum frame rates as well. So those benchmarks purely tested performance, but I also mentioned how power consumption has improved tremendously over the last few years and almost exponentially the last year with the release of Polaris and Pascal. During a GTA 5 benchmark, the system with the RX 550 consumed almost half the power than the 560 Ti consumed. The RX 560 was not far off either, with a 37% decrease in power consumption over the 560 Ti. If we look at performance per watt, we see tremendous strides over the competition at the time. The RX 560 almost doubles the GTX 560 Ti's performance per watt, and the RX 560 is also leagues ahead of 2011 technology. If we check performance per dollar, even greater advances are noted. The RX 550 triples the performance per dollar of the GTX 560 Ti, and the RX 560 is even ahead of that. Considering the 560 Ti debuted for $250 and the RX 550 and 560 debuted for $100 or less, this isn't very surprising. Let's look at this comprehensively by comparing my benchmarks with other video cards from the 560 Ti's era. According to TechPowerUp's 560 Ti review, the RX 550, which is about 5% slower than the 560 Ti at 1680 by 1050, would perform around a GTX 470. The RX 560, which is about 36% faster than the 560 Ti at the same resolution, is pushing Radeon HD 5970 speeds, a dual GPU that debuted at $600 with a 300 watt TDP. Something more interesting is performance per watt and performance per dollar. The RX 550 and 560 would lead the pack in performance per watt by a very large margin and utterly annihilate the competition in performance per dollar. Like, it wouldn't even be a fair competition. Essentially, if AMD released the RX 550 and 560 about 6 years ago, they would be one of the fastest video cards on the planet with the best performance per watt and performance per dollar. This video was more of a retrospective than anything else. While I did directly compare the 560 Ti to the RX 550 and 560, I did not expect it to lead the pack in anything, and I'm sure a lot of you probably assume the same thing. This was more so to show how far we've come in terms of technology. Now, these technological advances are expected. I mean, it has been more than 5 years, but I think often we forget how vast these advances really can be. I mean, I remember back in 2011, a lot of people recommended 600 watt power supplies for mainstream cards. Nowadays, you can recommend a 500 watt power supply as long as it's reliable for a top-end card, even if you are going to be overclocking a lot. So with all of that being said and done, how do you envision the video card industry in 5 years? Will we have GTX 1070 performance in $100 video cards, or do you think that perhaps the rise of APUs in the market will completely obliterate budget video cards altogether? So yeah, that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, then leave a like, and if you loved it, subscribe. A big shout out to TechPowerUp for letting me use their benchmarks, because those comparisons really do come in handy, and I'm glad that they still have them up on their site, even though they could take them down at any moment. That's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope to catch you guys again in the next one.